Well, thank you very much. And I think I'd like to begin, ladies and gentlemen, by congratulating Transparency International, and particularly the local chapter, for gathering so many of us here today and providing such a stimulating discussion. It's a great achievement and vital. Let me make quite clear at the outset that I don't subscribe to the views that nothing can be done. I have in David Cameron, a Prime Minister who is extremely energized on corruption, particularly this year, and as am I. I share that energy. Let me try and convey some of that. I mean, things simply don't stay the same in the world, or at least they don't need to. So the adoption of the global goals at the UN last year saw the world unite for the first time in a commitment to tackle corruption and to promote the rule of law and access to justice, to reduce illicit financial flows and strengthen the recovery and return of stolen assets. But we do need strong leadership and concerted action across the international community to realize this commitment and meet the demands of the billions, literally billions of people whose lives are blighted by the cancer of corruption. Because none of our countries are immune from this cancer. Morally, of course, it's the right thing to do. Corruption runs counter to our values. It rewards those who don't play by the rules. It creates a system of patronage where resources are shared by a small elite, while the majority are denied the benefits and proceeds of growth which are rightfully theirs. But tackling corruption isn't just morally right. As we've heard this morning, it's economically right too. Companies complicit in paying bribes find they face higher costs. They begin contracts which aren't completed or honoured, operating in an unpredictable environment which can change suddenly. And then, of course, they find they've suffered reputational damage for being complicit in a corrupt system. Look at it another way, which is perhaps still more important for a country like Trinidad and Tobago. Over the long term, it is those societies that create and enforce simple, stable rules which attract the high-value investment. Investors are simply prepared to risk more of their money in those environments and to innovate more. So we see a need in Britain for an integrated and comprehensive approach. We've heard all of those elements this morning. And indeed, global experience tells us that there are at least 3 elements which need to be pursued together to effect real change. Of course, countries need to have in place the right legislation and measures for its enforcement. But there also need to be in place measures to reduce the opportunity for corruption to take place. In the first case, through strengthened institutions, Transparency International, regulation, increased transparency, the adoption of a zero-tolerance approach. And thirdly, we need the grassroots empowerment for citizens, changing the culture, turning that complacent, well, it's just the cost of doing business, it's how we do things here, to one where each person says, actually, corruption simply isn't okay. And below those 3 key elements, of course, there is a need to act on a range of much more specific issues. Transparency on beneficial ownership, tackling the enablers of corruption, strengthening the key sectors and bodies, the reporting mechanisms, improving law enforcement cooperation, ending impunity for the corrupt, improving asset recovery, empowering those affected by corruption, using new technologies, strengthening the international systems. Because corruption is one of the greatest enemies of progress in our time. It is the cancer at the heart of many of the world's problems, not just this country's. And so we can't afford to sidestep it or make excuses for it. We need to step up and tackle it. And that is why my government, the British government, is hosting a global anti-corruption summit in London in May this year. A summit which brings together a coalition of the willing, ready to confront this issue. A coalition of the G20, other pivotal partners and countries with good practice to share, the leaders of the major international institutions that play a central role in coordinating and embedding anti-corruption efforts around the globe, and leaders from countries facing a challenging corruption problem, but who have a powerful commitment to overcoming it. So I'm delighted that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has accepted Prime Minister David Cameron's invitation to attend. I welcome his words this morning that it's no more business as usual. That needs to mean, through all of us working together, the end of that Johnny to Jack era it was described as earlier in this country. So this is a summit where we will put the world to work together to strengthen the tools we have to challenge corruption, to put fighting corruption at the heart of our international institutions, to support the investigators and prosecutors who can help bring perpetrators to justice, to maximize the way we use international aid to drive better governance, to make the rules and practices which govern global commerce even more resilient to threats from corruption, to give more support to those in business, in civil society, and in the media. But we wanted to focus on practical steps to prevent corruption, new ways to empower the victims, and concrete actions to end impunity for those who engage in corruption. We need to do this together, because less corruption means greater prosperity and greater security for us all. Thank you.